The German Shepherd's fangs were 3 inches from my throat when I saw the lieutenant's hand move toward his sidearm. The dog was shaking, snarling, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring about to snap. Blood was already running down my forearm where he'd clamped down during the initial lunge. The handler was screaming commands that weren't working anymore. The MPs had their hands on their weapons. Someone was yelling about putting the dog down, right there, right then. And all I could think about was how this wasn't how Rex was supposed to go. Not like this. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The sun coming through my kitchen window hits the coffee cup the same way every morning at 06:47 hours. I don't set alarms anymore, haven't needed to since 1992, but my body still wakes at 05:30 like it's reporting for duty. The house is quiet. My daughter moved to Portland 3 years ago. My wife passed in 2019. Cancer. The kind that takes its time. Some mornings I sit here and wonder if the silence is peace or just the absence of noise. There's a difference, though most people never learn it. I learned it in the desert, where silence could mean safety or an ambush depending on which way the wind was blowing. The coffee's gone cold by the time I realize I've been staring at the same spot on the table for 20 minutes. There's a scratch there, right near the edge, deep enough to catch your fingernail. My grandson made it 4 Christmases ago, dragging a toy truck across the wood while his mother wasn't looking. I never sanded it out. Didn't seem right to erase the evidence that someone small and alive had been here, making noise, leaving marks. The house is paid off. The VA checks come regular. I got my health, mostly if you don't count the ringing in my left ear and the knee that predicts rain better than any weather app. I'm 63 years old, and some days I feel every single year like there's stones in my pockets. Other days, I'm still 25, loading into a Humvee outside Dhahran, convinced I'm bulletproof because I haven't learned different yet. This morning, I feel both ages at once. The coffee's gone cold, but I drink it anyway because wasting things feels wrong when you've seen what scarcity really means. There's a memorial service this afternoon at the VFW Hall. Another guy from the old unit. Heart attack at 60. They're dropping faster now, my generation. The ones who came back anyway. Every funeral feels like roll call, and the list of names that answer gets shorter. I'll put on my service cap, the one with the pins that tell a story most people don't know how to read. I'll shake hands and hear the same stories I've heard before, because that's what we do. We repeat the stories until they become liturgy, until they're the only thing holding the memory together. But before I go, I need to sit here a little longer with this cold coffee and this scratch on the table and the sun hitting the window at exactly 06:47. Because some mornings the only thing that feels real is the routine, the shape of the day, the knowledge that time keeps moving forward even when you're not sure you want it to. I don't remember deciding to get up. One moment I'm sitting there with the empty cup, the next I'm standing at the hallway closet with my hand on the doorknob. The door sticks. It always sticks. Needs WD-40, has needed it for 2 years. But I keep not fixing it because there's something honest about a door that resists. Inside, on the top shelf behind the winter coats that don't get much use in Georgia, there's a cardboard box, not taped shut. Just folded closed the way you do when you're not trying to hide something but you're not exactly displaying it either. I pull it down and feel the weight shift. Medals in their cases, photographs in envelopes, a folded flag, paperwork from the VA, commendations I never framed. At the bottom, wrapped in an old t-shirt, there's a dog collar. Standard military issue, heavy nylon, frayed at the edges. The name tag is still attached. Rex, K9 Unit, 37th Security Forces Squadron. I haven't touched this collar in 30 years, haven't needed to. But this morning, standing in the hallway with dust motes floating in the light from the bedroom, my hands unwrap it without permission from my brain. The nylon is stiff, faded from green to a color that doesn't have a name. There's still sand in the buckle. Saudi sand. The kind that gets into everything and stays there, like the desert doesn't want to let you forget. I bring it up close and I can smell it. Not the collar, the memory. Diesel fuel, JP8 from the generators. The particular funk of unwashed soldiers living in tents. And underneath it all, dog. That specific smell of working dog, part fur and part intensity. The smell of an animal bred and trained for a single purpose. The smell hits me and suddenly I'm not standing in my hallway anymore. I'm standing in 120-degree heat with my BDUs stuck to my back, watching a German shepherd lose his mind, and I'm 25 years old again, and I'm scared, and I'm angry, and I'm about to do something that will define the rest of my life, even though I don't know it yet. Al-Kharj Air Base, 1991. February. The air war had been going for 3 weeks and the ground war was days away, maybe hours. Nobody told us enlisted much. We just loaded munitions and pulled guard duty and waited. The base was a city of tents and equipment, thousands of personnel rotating through, everyone on edge because Scud missiles were a real threat, and nobody knew if Saddam had chemical weapons loaded or if that was just psychological warfare. The dust was everywhere. In your food, your rack, your weapon. You'd clean your M16 twice a day, and it would still have grit in it by evening. I was assigned to a logistics unit, glorified warehouse work, making sure the right supplies got to the right places so the aircraft could keep flying. Not glamorous, not front line, but necessary. My staff sergeant was a guy named Howell from Tennessee. Decent enough, worked us hard, but fair. Most of the unit was okay. We had the usual military mix, guys from everywhere, different backgrounds, all grinding through the same deployment. The base itself sprawled across the Saudi desert like a temporary city that had somehow achieved permanence through sheer necessity. Rows of GP medium tents stretched in every direction, their tan canvas blending with the sand until the whole landscape seemed monochromatic. At night, when the generators kicked on, the tents would glow from within like paper lanterns, and you could trace the layout of the entire operation just by following the light. The air had a particular quality, dry enough to crack your lips within hours, hot enough during the day that metal surfaces became untouchable, cold enough at night that you needed every layer you'd brought. And always, always, there was the wind. It came from the east mostly, carrying fine particles of sand that worked their way into everything. Your ears, your nose, the mechanisms of your weapon, the pages of letters from home. You'd shake out your sleeping bag and watch a small desert pour onto the tent floor. You'd rinse your mouth and spit brown. You'd blow your nose and the tissue would come away gritty. The desert was patient. It was teaching us that we didn't belong here, that we were temporary, that it would still be here long after we'd gone home or died trying. But there were always a few who couldn't let things be simple. Specialist Crenshaw was one of them. White kid from somewhere in the Midwest, 23, talked a big game about his uncle who was a ranger, or his cousin who was a SEAL. Always somebody in his family who'd done something more impressive than what he was doing. He had a problem with me from day one. Nothing overt. Not at first. Just small things. Standing too close. Accidentally knocking my gear over. Making jokes that landed just on the edge of acceptable, where if you called him out, you'd look sensitive. I dealt with guys like Crenshaw my whole life. Growing up in South Carolina in the 70s and 80s, you learned to read the temperature of a room before you entered it. You learned which gas stations were safe to stop at and which ones meant trouble. You learned that some teachers would give you the benefit of the doubt, and some had already decided you were a problem before you opened your mouth. The military was supposed to be different. That's what the recruiter had told me. That's what the posters suggested. But the military was just America in uniform, and America had never quite figured out how to see me as just another soldier. I was always a black soldier. Always qualified with that modifier, that little asterisk that said, "He's good, considering." Crenshaw wasn't unique. He was just the latest iteration of something I'd been navigating since I was old enough to understand that my presence made some people uncomfortable for reasons that had nothing to do with who I was or what I'd done. You learn to navigate it. Keep your head down. Do your job better than they do theirs. Don't give them ammunition. Excel in ways that can't be dismissed or explained away. I made sure my uniform was always correct, my weapon always clean, my assigned tasks always completed ahead of schedule. I volunteered for the shifts nobody wanted. I helped guys who struggled with the technical aspects of the job, even when those same guys wouldn't sit next to me in the mess tent. You do all of this not because you believe it will change their minds, experience teaches you it usually won't, but because you refuse to give them the satisfaction of confirming their prejudices. You maintain your dignity because it's the only thing they can't take from you unless you give it away. But Crenshaw kept pushing, and in the pressure cooker of deployment, small frictions have a way of becoming structural cracks. The incident that started everything happened on a Tuesday. We were loading pallets for a supply run to a forward position. Crenshaw was on the forklift. I was guiding standard operation. He came in too fast, deliberately I'm certain, and nearly crushed my foot against a shipping container. I had to jump back, and the pallet shifted, and a crate of MREs went tumbling onto the sand. Nothing damaged, but now we had to repack everything, and Howell was watching from across the yard. Crenshaw climbed down from the forklift with this smirk on his face, this little satisfied twist to his mouth, and he said loud enough for 3 other guys to hear, "Maybe you should move faster, Jackson. Or is that asking too much?" The other guys looked away. That's what people do. They look away because getting involved means becoming a target, and everyone's just trying to survive their deployment and go home. I didn't say anything, just started restacking the crates. Crenshaw stood there for another few seconds, waiting for a reaction, and when he didn't get one, he walked off. But something shifted in that moment. He'd tested the boundaries and found them soft. Found that he could push and nobody would push back. That's when things got worse. Over the next week, it escalated. My assignments got switched without notice. My gear went missing and turned up in strange places. Once I found a note on my bunk, just 1 word, but the intent was clear. I took it to Howell. He looked at it, looked at me, and said, "You sure you want to make this a thing, Jackson? We're all under stress. Maybe someone's idea of a bad joke." That's what they always say. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Like the problem isn't the behavior, it's your reaction to it. I left his tent knowing I was on my own. That's a lonely feeling, being surrounded by people who are supposed to have your back and knowing they won't. Not really. Not when it costs them something. The K-9 unit was stationed on the opposite side of the base. They handled security patrols, explosive detection, perimeter work. I'd see them sometimes, handlers walking with their dogs. These animals so focused and disciplined, they seemed like different creatures from regular pets. German shepherds mostly, some Belgian Malinois. All business, all purpose. There was one handler I'd noticed, a sergeant named Diaz, who worked with a big male shepherd named Rex. Rex was legend on the base. 3 years old, certified in explosives and attack work, had more confirmed finds than any other dog in the squadron, but he had a reputation too. He'd washed 2 handlers before Diaz. Too aggressive, some people said. Too unpredictable. There were rumors about an incident at a previous posting. Something involving a civilian contractor and a bite that required surgery. The official story was that the contractor had ignored warnings and approached too quickly. The unofficial story, the one people told in the tents after dark, was that Rex just didn't like certain people, and once he'd decided he didn't like you, there was no changing his mind. I'd seen Rex from a distance during patrols. He moved like contained violence, every step precise, ears forward, eyes scanning. Even from 50 yards away, you could feel the intensity. Diaz kept him on a tight lead, and never let anyone approach. Smart. A working dog isn't a pet. It's a weapon system with fur, and you treat it with the same respect you'd give a loaded rifle. I had no reason to interact with the K9 unit. Our jobs didn't overlap, but that was about to change, because Crenshaw was about to make the biggest mistake of his deployment, and I was going to get caught in the blast radius. The incident happened on a supply run to the northern perimeter. 6 of us in 2 Humvees, delivering parts to a maintenance unit near the fence line. Standard job. Should have been routine. But Crenshaw was driving our vehicle, and I was in the back with another private named Torres. The northern perimeter was where the K9 unit ran drills. Long stretches of empty ground, good sight lines, space for the dogs to work. As we rolled past the training area, Crenshaw slowed down. "Y'all want to see something funny?" he said. Nobody answered, but he was already steering off the access road toward where Diaz was working with Rex. Diaz saw us coming and held up a hand. "Stay back, universal signal." Anyone with half a brain would have stopped. Crenshaw kept going. Torres said, "Man, he's waving us off." Crenshaw said, "I just want to see the dog. What's the problem?" But there was something in his voice, some edge that said this wasn't about curiosity. This was about something else. We pulled up about 20 yards from where Diaz was running Rex through a detection drill. Rex was locked onto something, nose down, every muscle engaged. Diaz looked over at us, annoyed now, and shouted, "Clear the area! We're working!" Crenshaw turned off the engine. Just sat there. Rex's head came up. He was looking at the Humvee now, at us, and even through the windshield I could see the change in his posture. Ears flat, hackles rising. Diaz shortened the lead and started moving Rex away from us, calling out again, "I need you to leave, now." That's when Crenshaw said the thing that made my blood go cold. He turned to Torres and me and said, "Bet that dog goes crazy for certain people. You know what I mean. Animals can smell things." He was looking at me when he said it. Torres looked at the floor, and I knew right then that whatever was about to happen wasn't an accident. Crenshaw got out of the Humvee. Diaz was shouting now, telling him to get back in the vehicle. But Crenshaw walked around to the passenger side, put his hands in his pockets like he had all day, and just stood there. Rex was pulling on the lead, focused entirely on Crenshaw now, a low growl building in his chest. I could hear it from inside the Humvee. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Diaz was trying to move Rex back, but the dog was locked on, and for the first time I saw Diaz struggling to hold him. That's when I opened the door and got out. I don't know why. Maybe because I could see where this was going and I wanted to de-escalate. Maybe because sitting in that Humvee while Crenshaw provoked a working dog felt cowardly. Maybe because some part of me was tired of being pushed, and this felt like a place to stand. I stepped out and said, "Crenshaw, get back in the vehicle." He looked at me and smiled. Actually smiled. "Why?" The sergeant said to clear the area. "I'm just following orders." Rex's growl got louder. Diaz was yelling for both of us to get back, his voice cracking now because he could feel the controls slipping. A working dog is trained to respond to threats, to protect, to attack on command. But when they lock on to something, when every instinct lights up at once, even the best handler can lose them, and Rex was losing it. Crenshaw took a step toward Diaz and Rex. Just one step, hands still in his pockets, casual as Sunday morning. That's when Rex broke. He lunged so hard the lead ripped out of Diaz's hand. 30 yards between them and Rex closed it in 4 seconds. Crenshaw stopped smiling, started backing up, hands out now, yelling, "Call him off! Call him off!" But Rex wasn't listening. He was past commands, past training. He was pure aggression and momentum. And he wasn't going for Crenshaw. He was coming for me. I don't remember making the decision. Your body acts before your brain catches up. Rex hit me like a freight train, 85 pounds of muscle and teeth, and we went down hard. I got my left arm up and he clamped on, fangs sinking through the BDU sleeve into the meat of my forearm. The pain was immediate and total, white-hot and spreading. He was shaking his head, trying to rip, and I could feel the skin tearing. People were shouting. Diaz was running toward us. Crenshaw was backing away. Torres was frozen next to the Humvee. And Rex was growling, this continuous rumbling sound that came from somewhere deep in his chest. Not quite animal. Not quite machine. The world narrowed to a tunnel. At the end of that tunnel was Rex's face, his eyes, the flecks of spittle on his muzzle. I could smell him, fur heated by the sun, the metallic tang of my own blood, something deeper that was pure aggression given physical form. His teeth were grinding against the bone in my forearm. Not just biting, working, trying to disable the threat. This was what he'd been trained for. This was his purpose, made manifest. I'd read the statistics once, back during pre-deployment briefings. A military working dog's bite force could exceed 300 pounds per square inch. They could crush bone, sever tendons, cause permanent nerve damage. And they didn't let go. That was the key thing they drilled into handlers. Once a working dog locks on, it's not thinking. It's not processing. It's executing a command that's been burned into its neural pathways through thousands of hours of training. Release comes from the handler's voice, or the threat's complete incapacitation. There's no middle ground, no negotiation. I couldn't get leverage. My right hand was pinned under my body. My left arm was in his mouth. Every time I tried to move, he bit down harder. The pain was reaching a point where it almost circled back around to something else. Not numbness exactly, but a kind of distant observation, like I was watching this happen to someone else. I could see his eyes, dark and wild, and there was no recognition there. No awareness, just instinct. Just the drive to neutralize the threat. The training manuals would later call this prey-drive escalation, or tactical aggression response, but those were just words to make the reality sound professional. The reality was simpler and more terrible. Rex had decided I was dangerous, and he was going to stop me by any means necessary. Then I heard the sound that made everything worse, the metallic slide click of someone drawing a sidearm. I turned my head and saw Lieutenant Morrison, the K-9 unit officer, standing 15 feet away with his M9 pistol pointed at Rex. His stance was textbook, feet shoulder-width apart, arms extended, sight picture aligned. He'd made the calculation already. I could see it in his face. Dog out of control, soldier in danger, liability increasing with every second. Solution: eliminate the variable. Morrison wasn't cruel. He wasn't acting out of malice or prejudice or anything personal. He was doing exactly what his training and his command responsibility demanded. But the result would be the same regardless of his intentions. Rex was about to die because he'd done what he'd been trained to do, and nobody had prepared him for the moment when the training would break. "Don't move," Morrison said, but I couldn't tell if he was talking to me or the dog. His voice was steady, professional, the voice of someone who'd made difficult decisions before and would make them again. This was just another problem to solve, just another situation that required force to resolve. Diaz was screaming now. "No, no, give me a second." His voice had gone high, desperate. He was reaching for Rex but didn't dare touch him, didn't dare trigger another response. Morrison's face remained stone. "Sergeant, that dog is out of control. If he doesn't release in 5 seconds, I'm putting him down." The counting started. I didn't hear Morrison say the numbers, but I could feel them. Could sense time compressing and expanding simultaneously. 5 seconds. An eternity. A blink. Rex's growl intensified. His teeth went deeper. Blood was running down my arm now, soaking into the sand, turning it dark and wet. The sand would drink it and show no evidence by tomorrow. That's how the desert worked. It consumed things, made them disappear. I could hear other people arriving, more voices, more commotion. Someone said, "Just shoot it." The casualness of it struck me even in that moment. Just shoot it. Like Rex was a malfunctioning piece of equipment. Like 3 years of training and service meant nothing the moment he stopped being useful. Someone else said, "Get a sedative." But Morrison's finger was on the trigger, and I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Risk assessment, liability, control. The dog was a danger. The dog had broken. The dog needed to be eliminated. And I was the variable he was willing to sacrifice to make that call. 5 seconds. That's what he'd said. I counted 3. Then something happened that nobody expected. I stopped struggling, just went completely still. Stopped trying to pull away, stopped tensing against the bite. Just relaxed. It's counterintuitive. Everything in you screams to fight, to escape. But I'd read something once, years ago, about dog behavior. About how resistance triggers deeper aggression. How stillness can confuse the predator-prey dynamic. I didn't know if it was true, didn't know if it would work. But Morrison had counted to 4, and Rex was about to die, so I tried. I let my body go slack, stopped pulling, stopped pushing, just breathed. Rex's growl changed pitch. Not gone, but different. Uncertain. His grip loosened, just slightly, and I could feel his teeth shift against the bone. Diaz was next to us now, hands hovering, afraid to grab the dog and trigger another attack. "Easy," he was saying, soft and low. "Easy, boy. Easy." Morrison still had the pistol raised. "Sergeant, wait," Diaz said. "Just wait." Rex's jaw loosened another fraction. I could feel the pressure releasing, the teeth sliding back. His growl dropped to almost nothing. Then, still not entirely sure why, I did something that should have gotten me killed. I lifted my right hand, slow, so slow, and I brought it up in a salute. Not to Morrison, not to Diaz, to Rex. Proper military salute, crisp and formal, held steady even though my arm was shaking. Rex's mouth opened. He let go, stepped back, sat down. Just like that. Ears up, eyes clear, like someone had flipped a switch. The whole area went quiet. Morrison lowered his weapon, looking confused. Diaz stared at me, then at Rex, then back at me. Crenshaw was 30 yards away now, white-faced and silent. And Rex sat there calm as Sunday morning, looking at me with something that wasn't aggression anymore. It was recognition. Respect. Like he'd seen something in me that made him stop. Made him remember he was more than teeth and fury. Made him remember he was a soldier. The medic came and wrapped my arm. 14 puncture wounds, 3 deep lacerations, no permanent damage if I kept it clean and didn't do anything stupid. They took Rex back to the K9 kennels. There was talk of an investigation, possibly retiring the dog, maybe putting him down if the behavioral assessment came back wrong. Morrison filed paperwork. Diaz filed paperwork. I had to give a statement. So did Crenshaw, though his version conveniently left out the part where he deliberately provoked the situation. Torres backed me up to his credit. Said Crenshaw had driven toward the training area against orders, had gotten out when told not to. It didn't matter much. The focus was on the dog. Whether Rex was safe to continue working, whether the unit could trust him not to break again. I sat in my tent that night with my arm throbbing and thought about what had happened. About the moment Rex let go. About the salute. I'm not a superstitious person. Don't believe in cosmic meaning or signs from the universe. But something had happened out there. Some communication beyond language. Rex had been ready to kill me, had every physical advantage, and then he'd just stopped. Because I'd shown him something. Because I'd treated him like what he was. A soldier, not an animal. Because I'd given him respect when everyone else was preparing to execute him. 3 days later, Diaz found me in the mess tent, sat down across from me without asking. "I want to know how you did it," he said. "Did what?" Made him stop. I've worked with Rex for 8 months. I've never seen him break that hard. And I've never seen him respond to a stranger. Never. So I'm asking you, Specialist Jackson, how did you make that dog sit? I didn't have a good answer. Still don't. I said, I showed him respect. Diaz looked at me for a long time. Then he said, Rex is going to a behavioral review board in a week. They're probably going to retire him. Send him back to the States, maybe euthanize him if they think he's too dangerous. But before they do, I want to try something. I want to see if he responds to you again. If what happened wasn't a fluke. I should have said no. Wasn't my job, wasn't my problem, and my arm was still bandaged. But I thought about Rex sitting there calm and clear-eyed after all that rage had drained away. Thought about Morrison's gun pointed at his head. Thought about a working dog getting put down because people didn't understand him. So I said yes. The kennel area was restricted. Only K9 personnel allowed. But Diaz vouched for me, and the kennel master agreed to let me in as long as Diaz was present. Rex was in the third run from the left, separated from the other dogs. They'd isolated him after the incident. Standard protocol for an animal that had shown aggression. He was lying down when we approached, head on his paws, but his ears came up the second he heard footsteps. When he saw me, he stood. Didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood there watching. Diaz said, I'm going to open the gate. If he comes at you, hit the ground and cover your head. I'll get him off. Okay, I'm serious, Jackson. If this goes wrong, it goes wrong fast. I understand. Diaz unlocked the gate, swung it open. Rex stood there completely still, eyes locked on mine. 3 seconds passed. 5. Then he walked out of the kennel, crossed the 10 feet of space between us, and sat down directly in front of me. Not aggressive, not submissive, just present, waiting. I looked down at him, at the dark eyes that had been wild with rage 3 days ago and were now calm and focused, at the scars on his muzzle from previous deployments, previous fights, previous moments when someone had asked him to do violence and he'd delivered. He was a weapon. He was a soldier. He was doing his job, just like the rest of us, in a place that was hot and dangerous and far from home. I lifted my hand slowly. Rex didn't move. I held it out, palm down, and let him sniff. His nose touched my knuckles, wet and cold. Then he leaned forward and pressed his head against my leg. Just rested it there. Like he was tired. Like he'd been fighting for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stop. Diaz exhaled. I'll be damned. I reached down and put my hand on Rex's head. His fur was coarse and warm. He leaned into the touch. And for the first time since arriving in Saudi Arabia, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. Diaz went to bat for Rex at the review board. Brought me in as a witness. I told them what happened. How Rex had stopped not because of force, but because of respect. How he'd responded to something human in the middle of his training breaking down. How maybe the problem wasn't that Rex was too aggressive, but that people didn't understand what he needed. The board wasn't impressed. One officer said, "A military working dog that can't be controlled is a liability. Period." Another said, "He nearly killed you, Specialist, and you're defending him?" I said, "He stopped. That's the point. He could have killed me, and he stopped." They deliberated for 2 hours. The decision came back. Rex would be retired from active duty, but would not be euthanized. He'd be sent to a military working dog rehabilitation program in Texas, evaluated for possible adoption by his handler or another qualified party. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it meant Rex got to live. Diaz was devastated. Rex had been his partner, his responsibility, and now he was losing him because of one bad day. But he also knew it could have been worse. The day before Rex was scheduled to ship out, Diaz brought him to my tent. "He should say goodbye," Diaz said. Rex walked in like he owned the place, tail up, confident. He went straight to my footlocker and sat down next to it, looking at me expectantly. Diaz laughed. He remembers you. I sat on the edge of my bunk and Rex came over, put his head on my knee again like he'd done in the kennel. I scratched behind his ears and he closed his eyes, and for just a moment, we were two soldiers taking a break from the war. You ever think about getting a dog? Diaz asked. After this? Maybe. He'd be good for you, and you'd be good for him. I don't think they'd let me adopt a military working dog. No, Diaz said. Probably not. But he was looking at me in a way that said he was thinking about it anyway. Rex left the next morning. I didn't watch him go. Too hard. Crenshaw got reassigned to a different unit 2 weeks later. Word got around about what he'd done, and even guys who'd looked the way before didn't want to work with someone who deliberately endangered personnel. I heard later he didn't re-enlist, went back to Iowa or Indiana or wherever. I didn't care. He was a small person who'd made small choices, and the desert had exposed him for what he was. The rest of the deployment passed without major incident. We ran supplies, pulled guard duty, counted down the days. The ground war kicked off in late February and was over in 100 hours. Iraq folded faster than anyone expected. The coalition forces pushed through Kuwait like water through sand, and Saddam's army collapsed under the weight of our technological advantage and the months of airstrikes that had preceded the ground assault. By March, we were packing up. The base that had been our temporary home for months was being systematically dismantled, tents coming down, equipment being loaded onto pallets. The infrastructure of war being broken down and shipped back to wherever it came from. There was a particular quality to those final days, a mix of relief and anticlimax. We'd prepared for something apocalyptic, for chemical attacks and urban warfare and casualties that would rival previous conflicts. Instead, we'd won so decisively, so quickly, that it almost felt unreal. Like we'd been training for a heavyweight fight, and the opponent had surrendered after the first round. By April, I was stateside, processing out at Fort Benning, turning in equipment, sitting through debriefings, filling out paperwork that asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Have you experienced any traumatic events during your deployment? The form asked. What counted as traumatic? The anticipation of violence that never came? The casual racism that was so constant it became wallpaper? The moment a dog almost killed me? The moment I thought I'd have to watch that same dog get shot? I checked no on most of the questions because I didn't have the language for what I'd actually experienced, and the military didn't seem interested in anything that couldn't be reduced to yes or no answers. I settled in Georgia. Seemed like as good a place as any. The weather was familiar. I'd grown up in South Carolina, so the heat and humidity felt like home. Used my GI Bill to get a degree in logistics management at Georgia State. The classroom was strange after the desert. Felt too clean, too safe, too full of people who'd never had to think about whether a pile of trash on the roadside might be an IED. I was older than most of my classmates by 5 years, older in experience by a lifetime. I'd sit in the back, take notes, ace the exams, and never quite feel like I was really there. Got a job with a shipping company after graduation. Entry-level coordinator position that paid decent and had benefits. Met my wife, Patricia, at a church cookout in 1994. She was a teacher, second grade, with a laugh that sounded like music and a way of looking at you that made you feel like you mattered. We dated for 8 months before I told her about the war, about Rex, about the things I carried that weren't visible. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, and when I finished, she said, "Thank you for telling me." That's when I knew. Had a daughter, Maya, in 1996. Watching her be born was the most terrifying and beautiful experience of my life. More intense than combat, more meaningful than any medal or commendation. I held her in the hospital room and promised I'd be better than the world had been to me. I'd make sure she grew up knowing her worth wasn't contingent on other people's ability to see it. Built a life that looked, from the outside, like I'd successfully transitioned from military to civilian. Nice house in a decent neighborhood. Steady job with promotions every few years. Family pictures on the wall. Lawn that needed mowing. But some things stay with you. I'd wake up at 05:30 no matter what. Couldn't break the habit. My body still thought it was reporting for duty. I'd check sight lines when entering buildings, automatic risk assessment, looking for exits, noting where people were positioned, calculating fields of fire even though nobody was shooting. Loud noises made me flinch. 4th of July was particularly bad. The fireworks sounded too much like distant artillery, and I'd spend the entire evening in the basement pretending I had work to do, while Maya and Patricia watched the neighborhood display from the backyard. They never pushed me to join them. Patricia understood, even though I'd never given her the full picture. And sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and Patricia was asleep beside me, and Maya was safe in her room down the hall, I'd think about Rex. Wonder where he ended up. If he was still alive. If someone had given him a home where he could just be a dog instead of a weapon. I'd remember the moment he sat down, the recognition in his eyes, the strange connection we'd forged in the Saudi sand. I'd touch the scars on my forearm, 14 puncture wounds that had healed into small white divots, barely visible but always there. Sometimes I'd trace them like reading Braille, like they spelled out a message I needed to remember. I tried to find out once in the mid-90s before the internet made research easy. Called the base in Texas where they'd sent Rex for rehabilitation. Got transferred 3 times, first to a general information line, then to a records department, finally to someone who sounded tired and overworked and not particularly interested in my question. Records on retired MWDs are sealed for privacy reasons, they told me. Privacy reasons? It's a dog. Sir, military working dogs are classified as equipment with sensitive operational histories. We can't release information about their disposition without proper clearance and justification. Dead end. I let it go. Figured some questions don't get answered. Figured Rex was probably gone anyway. German Shepherds don't live forever. And he'd been 3 in 1991. By the mid-90s, he'd have been pushing double digits, which is old for a dog his size. I told myself it was better not to know. Better to remember him sitting in the sand, eyes clear, tail straight, looking at me like we understood each other. Better to preserve that moment in amber than to find out it had ended badly. Then, in 2003, I got a letter. It appeared in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The envelope was wrinkled, redirected multiple times, forwarded through the VA, forwarded through my old unit's alumni association, forwarded through 2 address changes until it found me in Georgia. The return address was in New Mexico, a place called Deming that I'd never heard of. The name was Diaz. Just seeing that name made my heart rate spike. I stood at the end of my driveway holding the envelope, afraid to open it. Afraid it would be notification that Rex was gone, that I'd missed the chance to say goodbye, that the only connection I still had to that desert moment was about to be severed. Cars drove past. Neighbors waved. The October sun was warm on my shoulders. Everything was normal and ordinary and safe, and I was standing there with my hands shaking, staring at an envelope that might contain bad news from 12 years ago. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, the kind with blue lines and holes punched for a binder. The handwriting was neat, slightly cramped, the penmanship of someone who'd been taught proper form but didn't write often. And there was a photograph, a 4x6 color print on glossy paper, slightly faded. The photo showed an older German Shepherd, gray around the muzzle, lying on a wooden porch in the sun. He was stretched out, relaxed, front paws crossed. He wore a regular collar, blue nylon, not military issue. Behind him I could see desert landscape, sagebrush and red dirt and distant mountains. His eyes were half closed, peaceful. He looked content. He looked like he'd found whatever it is soldiers are searching for when the war ends. The letter was short. Jackson, I don't know if this address still works. Been trying to track you down for a while. Figured you'd want to know. Rex is still here. Retired to my family's place in '92 after the rehab program cleared him. Took him almost 6 months to decompress. He'd pace at night, bark at sounds nobody else could hear, startle at sudden movements. Classic stuff. But gradually he figured out nobody was asking him to be a weapon anymore. He's 13 now. Slowing down. Arthritis in his hips. Sleeps about 20 hours a day. But still stubborn. Still won't let anyone else feed him. Still does a perimeter check every morning before he eats. You never really take the soldier out of them, I guess. I should have written sooner. Should have told you years ago. But I wasn't sure how to explain what happened in the desert. Wasn't sure you'd even want to hear from me. The review board, the way things ended. It was messy. But Rex got through it. He had a good life after the desert. Still having it, actually, though I know we're on borrowed time now. We all deserve that. A good life after the war. Thought you'd want to know he made it. Hope you did too. Diaz. I stood there in my driveway holding that photo, and I cried. Just stood there in the sun and let it come, all the things I'd carried for 12 years without putting them down. Relief that Rex had survived, that he'd found peace, that the last image I'd have of him wouldn't be sitting alone in a kennel waiting for judgment. Gratitude for Diaz, for taking Rex home, for giving him those extra years, for tracking me down to let me know. Grief for time past, and connections lost, and moments that should have ended worse, but didn't. Grief for all the conversations I'd never have with Rex. Though what would we have said? He was a dog. But still. There had been understanding between us. Recognition. And now I knew it had lasted. Had endured beyond that single moment in the sand. Patricia came out and found me there. She'd been watching through the kitchen window, had seen me standing frozen at the mailbox for 10 minutes. She walked down the driveway in her bare feet, work clothes still on from her teaching day, and just stood beside me. She looked at the photo in my hand, looked at me, and didn't ask questions. She knew, somehow, knew this was important, knew this connected to something I'd never fully explained. She just put her hand on my shoulder and let me have the moment. Let me stand there crying over a dog I'd known for 3 days in 1991. A dog who'd nearly killed me and whom I'd somehow saved and who'd somehow saved me right back. The sun's lower now, coming through the kitchen window at a different angle. The coffee cup is empty. The memorial service starts in 2 hours. I'll put on my service cap, drive to the VFW hall, shake hands with men who are becoming ghosts. But right now I'm still sitting here with Rex's old collar in my hands, thinking about the desert, about Morrison's gun, about the moment a dog decided I was worth not killing. People talk about respect like it's something you demand, or something you earn through dominance. I've heard it 1,000 times, in 1,000 different contexts. You gotta command respect. Make them respect you. Show them who's boss. Like respect is territory you conquer and hold through force. But that's not what respect is. That's just fear wearing a fancy name. That's just people learning to hide their contempt behind compliance. Real respect is something else entirely. It's recognition. It's seeing the humanity, or the dogness, or whatever essential quality makes a being what it is, and honoring it even when it costs you something. Even when it's inconvenient, even when it's scary. Rex taught me that. Not through words, because he didn't have words. Through action. Through the moment he let go and sat down and looked at me like I was someone who understood him. I didn't dominate him, didn't overpower him, didn't force submission. I just showed him that I saw him, that I recognized what he was, a soldier doing his job, a being with dignity and purpose who'd gotten lost in a moment of confusion. The salute wasn't about military protocol or proper form. It was about acknowledgement. about saying, without words, "I see you. I understand what you're carrying. You're not alone in this." And somehow, against all logic and training and instinct, that message got through. That recognition reached him in a way that commands and force and Morrison's gun never could have. I kept that lesson, carried it through 30 years of civilian life, through workplace conflicts and neighborhood disputes, and the thousand small moments where you have to choose between escalation and de-escalation, between proving you're right and actually solving the problem. I chose de-escalation, not always successfully. I'm human, I've lost my temper, I've said things I regretted. But more often than not, I remembered Rex, remembered that moment in the sand, remembered that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop, is recognize the humanity in the person you're fighting with, is offer respect even when, especially when, they haven't earned it by conventional metrics. I saw it play out at work. There was a warehouse supervisor, guy named Mitchell, who had a reputation for being difficult, angry, aggressive, always looking for a fight. He particularly seemed to have a problem with the black drivers and coordinators. Nothing you could prove in an HR complaint, just a pattern of behavior, harder assignments, more scrutiny, less patience for mistakes. The kind of thing that's obvious if you experience it, but deniable if you call it out. Most people dealt with Mitchell by avoiding him or matching his aggression, and that just made everything worse. One day, I had a shipment come in damaged. Equipment worth about $15,000 mangled in transit because the loading crew had secured it wrong. Mitchell was ready to write me up, blame me for the contractor's failure, make it my problem. He was in my face, voice raised, enjoying the power dynamic. I could have matched his energy, could have gotten loud right back, could have made it about race, about patterns, about all the ways he'd been making my job harder for 2 years. But I thought about Rex, about that moment when everything could have gone violent and didn't, because someone chose recognition over dominance. So I looked Mitchell in the eye and said, quiet and calm, "I know you're frustrated. This is an expensive mistake and it reflects on your department. If I was in your position, I'd be upset too. But we both know I didn't load that truck. So instead of trying to figure out who to blame, why don't we figure out how to fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again?" He stopped, just like Rex had stopped. The aggression drained out of his posture. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to figure out if I'd just played him somehow. But there was no trick, just recognition. Just acknowledgement that his frustration was real, even if it was being directed at the wrong target. We fixed the problem. Together. Started having a different kind of working relationship after that. Not friends, but not enemies. Just two people doing their jobs. Years later, Mitchell told me I was the first person at that company who'd ever treated him like he was smart. Said he'd been working warehouses for 20 years, and everyone acted like being a supervisor was as high as he could go, like he didn't have aspirations beyond that. He said my respect meant something. Changed how he saw himself. I thought about Rex when he said that. Thought about how being seen, really seen, changes things at a fundamental level. Not because I was afraid of conflict. The Army had beaten any fear of conflict out of me. But because Rex had shown me there was more strength in stopping than in continuing. More courage in choosing peace than in choosing violence. The world doesn't teach you that. The world teaches you that strength looks like domination. That power means making others submit. That real men, real soldiers, never back down. But Rex and I both knew different. We'd both been in moments where the easy choice was to keep fighting, and we'd both found the harder choice, the braver choice, was to stop, to recognize, to honor the other. The scratch on the table catches the light. My grandson's toy truck, leaving evidence. I think about all the marks we leave without meaning to. The scars on my arm from Rex's teeth, faded now but still visible if you look close. 14 small divots in the meat of my forearm, arranged in the pattern of a German shepherd's bite. The scratch on the table. The memories that surface at 0647 when the sun hits the coffee cup just right. The lessons we carry that shape how we move through the world. We're all just trying to leave marks that mean something. Trying to be remembered not for our worst moments, but for what we did after them. Rex had a worst moment in the desert. A moment when his training broke and his instincts took over, and he became pure aggression with no off switch. A moment when everyone watching expected him to kill me and then get killed himself. That could have been his legacy. Could have been how his story ended. Military working dog fails, attacks handler, gets put down. Statistics, paperwork. Another dog cycled through the system. But that's not what happened. Because in that worst moment we found a way to see each other, to communicate across species and training and fear, to choose something better than the violent path we were both careening down. And that changed both of our stories. So did I. I had worst moments too. Moments when I wanted to match the aggression that came at me. Moments when I wanted to prove my worth through force, through showing everyone who doubted me that I was stronger, smarter, more capable than they'd assumed. Moments when the accumulated weight of small humiliations and casual racism made me want to burn everything down just to feel the warmth. But I kept choosing differently, kept remembering the lesson, kept trying to recognize rather than dominate. And slowly, over decades, that choice built a life. Not a perfect life. Not a life without struggle or pain or moments of failure. But a life with dignity. A life where I could look at myself in the mirror and know I'd tried to be better than the world's lowest expectations. So did Crenshaw, though I doubt he learned anything from his. He had his worst moment too. He deliberately provoked a dangerous situation because he wanted to see someone hurt, wanted to confirm his prejudices, wanted to prove something about hierarchy and dominance and who belonged and who didn't. And when it all went wrong, when Rex attacked and everything spiraled out of control, Crenshaw just backed away. Didn't help, didn't take responsibility. Just retreated to safety and let others deal with the consequences. That was his choice. That was his mark. I heard he went back to Iowa or Indiana or wherever he came from. Heard he didn't re-enlist. The military had exposed him for what he was. Someone whose cruelty was inversely proportional to the danger he faced. Someone who would push when it was safe and vanish when it wasn't. Someone small. The difference is what you do with those moments. Whether you let them define you or whether you find a way to sit down, calm yourself, and remember you're more than your worst impulses. Whether you learn or you just repeat. Whether you choose recognition or dominance. Whether you honor the dignity in others, even when, especially when, the world tells you they don't deserve it. The memorial service will be sad. Another name added to the list of the gone. Another story repeated until it becomes liturgy. But there will also be coffee, bad cookies, and men who understand what it means to have been young and scared and far from home. We'll shake hands. We'll say the same things we always say. And for a few hours, we won't be alone with our memories. That's worth something. That's worth the drive. I wrap the collar back up in the old t-shirt and return it to the box. Put the box back on the shelf behind the winter coats. Close the closet door and feel it stick like it always does. Some things don't need fixing. Some things are fine the way they are, resistance and all. I wash the coffee cup, put on a clean shirt, find my service cap with the pins that tell a story. Check my watch, 11:30 hours. Plenty of time to get to the VFW hall. Plenty of time to remember that I'm still here, still standing, still carrying the weight of all those years but not crushed by them. Rex made it. Diaz made it. I made it. We all got through the desert and found some version of peace on the other side. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Before I leave, I stand in the kitchen one more time, looking at the scratch on the table, the sunlight through the window, the shape of my life laid out in small domestic details. The war was 34 years ago. It feels like yesterday. It feels like someone else's life. Both things are true. I pick up my keys, walk to the door, and step out into the Georgia heat. The day is waiting. The memorial service is waiting. The living are waiting. And the dead are already gone. And somewhere in my memory, a German shepherd sits calmly in the Saudi sand, looking at me with eyes that say, "I see you. I understand. You're one of us." That moment is still real, still true, still the thing that taught me what it means to recognize the soldier in someone else and honor it, even when, especially when, everything is falling apart. So did I. I had worst moments too. Moments when I wanted to match the aggression that came at me. Moments when I wanted to prove my worth through force, through showing everyone who doubted me that I was stronger, smarter, more capable than they'd assumed. Moments when the accumulated weight of small humiliations and casual racism made me want to burn everything down just to feel the warmth. But I kept choosing differently, kept remembering the lesson, kept trying to recognize rather than dominate. And slowly, over decades, that choice built a life. Not a perfect life. Not a life without struggle or pain or moments of failure, but a life with dignity. A life where I could look at myself in the mirror and know I'd tried to be better than the world's lowest expectations. So did Crenshaw, though I doubt he learned anything from his. He had his worst moment too. He deliberately provoked a dangerous situation because he wanted to see someone hurt, wanted to confirm his prejudices, wanted to prove something about hierarchy and dominance and who belonged and who didn't. And when it all went wrong, when Rex attacked, and everything spiraled out of control, Crenshaw just backed away. Didn't help. Didn't take responsibility. Just retreated to safety and let others deal with the consequences. That was his choice. That was his mark. I heard he went back to Iowa or Indiana or wherever he came from. Heard he didn't re-enlist. The military had exposed him for what he was, someone whose cruelty was inversely proportional to the danger he faced. Someone who would push when it was safe and vanish when it wasn't. Someone small. The difference is what you do with those moments, whether you let them define you or whether you find a way to sit down, calm yourself, and remember you're more than your worst impulses. Whether you learn or you just repeat. Whether you choose recognition or dominance. Whether you honor the dignity in others even when, especially when, the world tells you they don't deserve it. The memorial service will be sad. Another name added to the list of the gone. Another story repeated until it becomes liturgy. But there will also be coffee, bad cookies, and men who understand what it means to have been young and scared and far from home. We'll shake hands. We'll say the same things we always say. And for a few hours we won't be alone with our memories. That's worth something. That's worth the drive. I wrap the collar back up in the old t-shirt and return it to the box. Put the box back on the shelf behind the winter coats. Close the closet door and feel it stick like it always does. Some things don't need fixing. Some things are fine the way they are, resistance and all. I wash the coffee cup, put on a clean shirt, find my service cap with the pins that tell a story. Check my watch, 11:30 hours. Plenty of time to get to the VFW hall. Plenty of time to remember that I'm still here, still standing, still carrying the weight of all those years, but not crushed by them. Rex made it. Diaz made it. I made it. We all got through the desert and found some version of peace on the other side. That's not nothing. That's actually everything. Before I leave, I stand in the kitchen one more time, looking at the scratch on the table, the sunlight through the window, the shape of my life laid out in small domestic details. The war was 34 years ago. It feels like yesterday. It feels like someone else's life. Both things are true. I pick up my keys, walk to the door, and step out into the Georgia heat. The day is waiting. The memorial service is waiting. The living are waiting. And the dead are already gone. And somewhere in my memory, A German shepherd sits calmly in the Saudi sand, looking at me with eyes that say, "I see you. I understand. You're one of us." That moment is still real, still true, still the thing that taught me what it means to recognize the soldier in someone else and honor it, even when, especially when, everything is falling apart. If this story found you at the right moment, let me know where you're listening from. Sometimes sharing difficult memories helps carry the weight. And maybe if you've ever had a moment where respect changed everything, where someone saw you when others didn't, tell that story too. We need more of those. The world's got enough violence and judgment. What we need are more moments where someone stops, sits down, and recognizes the soldier in someone else. That's how we make it through. That's how we've always made it through.